Hello and welcome to the Car Care channel. In today's video, we're going to build a complete brand new Toyota long block. Toyota does not sell a long block. If you would like to buy a new engine, this is how it comes. Piece by piece. The only thing that is fully assembled is a short block. For reasons beyond me, they don't do that. That's just how they've always been. Now, this engine is a 2AR FE 2.5 liter. We're going to assemble the complete long block completely. Toward the end of the video, we'll talk about what happened to the old one, what car it goes into, and I hope you guys will find some educational value of how an engine is assembled piece by piece and how beautiful it looks because it's brand new. Everything from top to bottom, almost. Let's get into it. So before we get started, let's kind of understand what's going on here. Where are all these boxes? Every engine build starts with a block. In this case, we have a short block, so it's fully assembled. Crank, rods, pistons, rings, everything is fully assembled from the factory. So that's what we are going to start with. We're going to mount it on an engine stand and go from there. Everything you see here, that big box, is actually a cylinder head, cam cradle, valve cover, cams. All this is a cylinder head. It doesn't come assembled, which is interesting. This is a gasket kit, front timing cover. There's some water pump. There's all kinds of different stuff. The only part we are reusing from the old engine, and simply because it would have added almost $1,000 to this bill for parts that are just a cover or something small that we can easily clean and be done. It's going to be the upper lower oil pan and the housing for the PCV system in the back of the block. That's the only thing we're reusing from the old engine, and maybe if time allows at the end of the video, I'll show you what happened to the old engine. Let's get the short block on an engine stand. Let's start assembling. Let's get the short block. So we're going to assemble our upper oil pan. I know this is upside down because the engine is upside down. So this is a part we reused. Might not look very pretty, but it was a lot worse. Here's a before and after shot. Cleaned up a lot, but fortunately aluminum, once it gets oxidized, you can't do much about it to make it look nice. But function-wise, there's actually nothing here. It's just a very wide passages. There's not even small passages. So right here, it's a big saving for the customer, so we're not going to just for the sake of this looking very nice, it doesn't affect the function of the engine. The main thing here is the function of the engine. So, first thing is, new balance shaft. We'll talk about it. Let's install it. Let's prep this, and we'll install it on the block. We'll go from there. Let's get out our new balance shaft. Folks, the 2AR and the 1AR FE engines, they are having issues with the balance shaft. And there's something different between this engine and the 2AZ. The 2AZ had a serviceable balance shaft. You could take it apart, you could change gears, you could do everything with it that you need to. This engine, you cannot do that. And the interesting thing is, there's, at least according to the text that we're reading here, there is a specific Teflon coating on these. And once that coating wears off from, of course, you guessed it, low engine oil, it will actually start making noise. And the distinct noise they make is when you take off from a dead stop, and a little bit more aggressively, you hear like a big grind. See, this one doesn't have barely any noise. This is just some assembly oil. Wipe it down, just we don't want it going everywhere. We haven't even started, we're already making a mess. So we're going to install the balance shaft onto the upper oil pan. There's 2 bolts that hold it. Correction, it is 3 bolts that hold it. To the upper oil pan, or actually the more correct term is stiffening case. Torque for this one is 18 pound. That is done. We are ready to install this on the engine. Before we do, we're going to flip it so we can add our sealer. We're going to do our final cleaning here. Seal packing 103, basically called FIPG or form in place gasket, or straight term is fippage. This is a very simple tube to operate. Going to open it, put the nozzle, and put this little roller on it so we can roll it easily. I'm going to cut the tip and we'll start. Let's apply our sealer. Okay, this is ready. Let's go clean our block and we'll install it. Let's clean our surface here. Before we forget, this is the easiest time to install your rear main seal. That's good. Now let's install our stiffening case. There's a specific position for this installation. Crank has to be, keyway has to be at 90 degrees, and the lobes of the balance shaft have to face each other. Let's install the rest of the bolts. All the 14mm bolts are 32. The 12mm bolts are 18. That's it. This is done. Now we do the baffle. The baffle we're also reusing, and the pickup tube. Pickup tube, we just cleaned it. There was not really debris in it. And the baffle as well. It's just a piece of metal that keeps oil from coming up into the crank easily when you make turns. Here's that baffle. Torque is 7 here. Let's install a new gasket on our strainer here. That's good. Torque over here is 7 as well. Now we're ready for the oil pan. We're going to give our pan the last cleaning. Then we're going to apply some sealer. Okay, we are ready to install it. We're going to give this surface its final wipe down. And install all new bolts. Torque for this one is also 7. We're going to install a new oil filter. and a new oil filter cap as well. This engine actually had a metal one, which was an aftermarket one. We are returning it to OEM, which is a plastic one. Gonna put the gasket, put some oil on it. New filter. And torque this to 18. I'm going to install the drain plug with a new gasket. That's one way to do an oil change, upside down. 30 is the torque spec for this one. Let's flip this block. Now the semi-major operations are done with the block. We just have to put the PCV baffle over here and we are good. But now there is this little plastic piece. Most folks will see this, and I've seen technicians forget this when they do an engine. All this does is it's a baffle for coolant. This is a coolant jacket right here around the cylinders. All this does is keeps noise away. You know, gurgling sounds, whatnot. It keeps it away. So with that, here is our new head gasket. Now we go assemble our cylinder head, which is all new, doesn't even have the tubes in it. We're going to cover this engine up and go work on our cylinder head. Let's get our cylinder head. This is the brand new cylinder head for this engine. Let's pull the cylinder head out of the box. Thank you. What a beautiful sight this is. So here's what comes with the cylinder head. You have the 4 spark plug tubes, and you have 2 little rings that align your cam cradle. I am not going to install these until we get all our valves in here. That makes it a lot easier actually, because then you can really access things like your valve stem seals and whatnot. You can install that last. So let's do that. I'm gonna put some oil at where the seal goes. This seal keeps oil from going into the combustion chamber, which by installing it, you actually put a little bit of oil there, which is fine. It'll burn off when you start this engine. Put our exhaust valve stems, and they just kind of clip on there. On Toyota engines, the intake and exhaust valve stems are different. I missed these two on the way. Okay, that's all our valve stems installed. Now we're going to start installing our valves. Let's put our cylinder head on the side. Let's install our valves. Gotta put a little bit of oil on the stem. That's the intake valves. Now we're going to do the exhaust. That's all the valves into the cylinder head. Now we're going to put our valve springs in. But before we do, we got to install our retainers. This prevents the spring from damaging the aluminum, just helps it stay there. And before we put our valve springs on, these are the lifters. We want to put them in oil so they can start bleeding on the inside, and then we're going to manually bleed them, because otherwise we're going to have problems. We're going to soak them in 0W20 oil, just a little cup. So we make sure we don't go drinking this. That would be really bad. So, put this here. Here's how the lifters come. Intake and exhaust lifters are exactly the same part. Same thing with the valve springs. The valves are different. And then don't you love Toyota for this? They give you an individual box for each little lifter. Such a nice box in white and a little bag. So this is gonna be a while. See how they're bubbling? That's what we want to do. We want all the air to come out of them. So we're going to take our little oil milkshake here. We'll leave it on the side. And when we get to that, they'll be all bled and ready to go. We'll just manually bleed them, make sure they're good. And we're good with that. Before we put our valve springs, we put a little bit of oil underneath them. Then the valve springs. They are all the same for this engine. Intake and exhaust, unlike the valves. Now we're going to get the retainer and the two valve keepers. So this will depend how you assemble this on the tool you're using. If you're using a big clamp, you're just going to put only the... Oh, this guy already wants to leave. You're going to only put the retainer without the keepers. But the tool we are going to use, this is the easiest way to do this. And you'll see that tool probably do two valves and then just do some editing magic, and you'll see them all done. So the tool I use is, this is a Lyle tool 360/50. Used it for a very long time. It's actually an old version of it, a little worn. Yeah, I've seen a lot of engines. This is the size for a Toyota. So this is the remover. If we were removing this, we just put this, hit it with a hammer, it'll push the valve down. It has a magnet on the inside. It'll pull the keepers and it comes out. And then this is the installer. So this will keep the keepers in place. When you push down, as you contact the valve, this will come out and the keepers will actually, this will get pushed in and the keepers will sit. The only thing you have to do is, the valve right now, with this one, it actually drops down. So you got to put something underneath it to hold it up. I'm going to use a towel. Lift the cylinder head a little bit. Hopefully nothing drops. And put it right underneath these two valves. We're going to double check. This one moves a little bit. Reposition. In case this one dropped, I'll show you in case you want to see it. There's the retainer, valve keeper, and another valve keeper. That's it. So now our valves are held steady. Let's get our tool. So you want to position it on center. That's it. You want to make sure your valve keeper is flat, not one of them sticking out and is halfway engaged. Very dangerous if that happens. Immediately flip down and push it. So let's do the second one. This one is also good, and we're going to go back and test them in a bit. But we basically now going to repeat this 14 more times. So with the magic of some editing, we're going to go from this to this. They're all installed. Now we have to test them. So we're going to grab a brass drift so we won't damage the tips. Just going to what I'm doing here is I'm pushing each valve, opening it. So if the keeper is not sitting, or it looks like it's sitting but it's not, it would have popped already because I pushed it down. So these are all good. We are set here. So now we're going to install our spark plug tubes. We're going to get any oil here. May have seeped up. We got to install sealer. I'm going to do this one at a time. These are not directional. You have to put a small bead of sealer here, otherwise you'll have all kinds of problems. You'll have oil on spark plugs. Some will say it is the tube seals at the top, but most of the time it is actually this one. So put this block of wood. Have to measure. We need to go more. So the depth on it is 112 millimeters. Give or take, because they tell you it's 111, 112 millimeters, but they don't actually tell you where to measure it from. They show you a very horrible picture. The idea is you don't want to go too far in where your seal, but if they're popped up a little bit more than usual, you're okay. Because the seal will just sit a little bit down, we're okay. I mean, there is a space between here and the top of the valve cover, so we're okay. Need to go a little bit more. I like that. That's good. Let's do the next ones. So they are within half a millimeter or less, give or take, of each other. You can never get them exactly the same because I don't want to keep pushing on them. That's how you get one tooth down. But the bottom line is this one is exactly at the right height. These are within up to a millimeter off of this one because I don't want to keep pushing on it, because these are press fit, and if you keep pushing on them, I run the risk of cracking the cylinder head. So as long as we are not too low, which this one is the exact height, we are good. Now before we clean this up, because you know when you hit it with a block of wood it just comes apart and you leave some debris, we're going to install the pins that go here. This is what locates your cam cradle. These don't have sealer or anything, they're just locating pins, which are very interesting to install. This height looks good to me. It's gonna be very difficult to measure it because it is, yes, that is, see, my measuring tape is in centimeters. So 0.7 is what we're looking at. We're right there. There's 7 millimeters. So that is good. Let us clean our cylinder head with some compressed air. I mean, we're not cleaning it from anything, just any wood chips. Let's get them out. That is good. Now the $1,000,000 question is, why aren't these installed from the factory, Toyota? And I'll tell you why. Because if they do, they have to put a bigger box and pack it, like kind of foam to hold this so these wouldn't get damaged. It costs them less to do this. No other way around it. That's just the truth here. So this cylinder head is actually done and ready to go back on the engine. Let's do that. So now we're going to install our cylinder head. Before we do, I'm going to flip it and give the surface a quick wipe. We're just trying to get any debris that might have got stuck here, any oil, because this is already machined and it's ready to go. Now on the block for the 2ARFE, Toyota wants you to put a little bit of sealer between the pleats of the, not between the pleats of the head gasket, but underneath it and over it. This is the area of the front timing cover meets head meets block. They want to really enforce it. Believe it or not, they don't do this from the factory, but in the repair manual they want you to do this. So of course we're gonna follow the book here. Just a little bit. That's all we need. This is good. Let's install our cylinder head. There's that. Make sure it's seated 100%. Yes, it is. Now we do have new head bolts and new washers. Let me unbox these real quick. We'll install them. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put oil on the threads, oil on the inside of the bolt head. So when we stretch this bolt on this washer, we wouldn't be running it dry. Just gonna run these bolts down. So here's how the torque sequence is gonna go, or not the sequence, the torque. We have 27, that just sets them, and then we're gonna stretch them. We're gonna do 2 sets of 90 degrees. Irrelevant what the torque, final torque is, we're gonna do 90 degrees. This stretches these bolts and everything is good. Once you set them, we are done. We're not going back to check the torque anymore because you stretched them already. So we're gonna start with our 27th. That is our first set of 27. Now we're gonna start stretching. We're gonna set our torque wrench to degrees. We're gonna go 90 degrees. So these torque wrenches, the electronic ones, you can use them to do degrees. If you don't, you're gonna mark the head of the bolt. You're gonna do 90 degrees and you'll see that mark go to 90. And then once you're done doing one sequence, you're gonna do it again. And in case you're doing any engine work, when you loosen stuff that are under heavy load like this or anything with cams, when you loosen, you start from the outside, you walk your way in. When you're tightening, you tighten from the inside and you walk your way in outside. That is always the general rule of thumb, but there's always exceptions, but for the most part, with Toyotas at least, that is the case. So we're gonna do our first set of 90s here. So the cool thing about this torque wrench is you can actually stop halfway and ratchet and come back and it'll still tell you because we got to work around the tubes. So that is our first set of 90 stretch. We're going to start all over again, and this is when things are going to get interesting because the whole engine will want to twist on the stand. So yeah, let's just get this done. That's it. The cylinder head is fully tightened. We are good. All these strange noises, that is just the bolt stretching. So we're good. Let's go work on our cam cradle. Welcome to day 2. One haircut later, lots of events in between. We're back to the engine. We're gonna start assembling our valve train. Not the valves themselves, but like the lifters and the roller rockers and whatnot. So let's start getting ready for that. And you remember, for me, it's been a few days actually. It's not the consecutive day here. For you, it might have been a few seconds. We put the lifters in a bucket of oil, and I left them there intentionally. I let them soak up, that's fine. We gotta actually bleed them before we install them. So let's go do that. So we're gonna bleed the lifters. I'm gonna add some more oil in this wider container. That's good. This is the special tool that bleeds. This is an original tool from Toyota that bleeds these lifters. So I'm gonna do one, and then it's been soaking in oil. I'm gonna leave it in here soaking in oil. And then this tool is actually gonna go through the nose. It's gonna open it up. We're gonna pump it to get all the air out of it. Just like so. You see that? It's pumping up. You can never 100% pump it all the way. But you see there's no more air coming out? Let's make sure. Oh, we still got air coming out of it. You see the air bubbles. Here's the opening. See how we're still getting air out of it? We have to do that 16 times. So it's gonna be a while. I'm still getting micro bubbles out of it. I think this one is primed. Yep, this one is primed. I'm gonna leave it here. Now I'm gonna do this off camera. I'm gonna bleed all of them, and we'll install them. So now we're gonna install our lifters. This is something not in the book, but I've always done it. I always put a little bit of oil in the passage. Although most of it will drain down, but I've always done this, never had issues with lifters giving me a hard time to bleed after this, so. So, lifters just go in there. Lifters should never be hard to push in, should go very smoothly. Like this one is dropping on its own, that's good. Some of these lifters gave us a hard time to bleed. That's normal. They're new. They have a lot of air in them. They're gonna do that. Though we soaked them, but we didn't soak the inside part. You have to open the check valve to do that. We're gonna test them, make sure they're all pumped up. Because if one of them comes down, we gotta bleed it again. It shouldn't, but that's what makes all kinds of rattling noises when you start it until they fully pump up. We're going to try to avoid that. Solid. They are all solid. I like them. I usually always put some oil at the tip as well. Now we're going to assemble our caps. These are just the caps that protect the tip of the valve from the rocker. Now we're going to put our rockers. Put some oil on these. Aren't these things beautiful? We don't have to worry about the position of them because they are all new. They're going to wear in together. Put some oil on the rollers. So this is the valve train complete. Now we just have the cams left. Folks, by the way, this is a 2AR FE. 1AR is the same. 2GR, all 2GRs are the same. All your V8s, the newer V8s, the UR series V8s, all of them have the exact same powertrain. I'll tell you something about these. See how this is just floating? It's literally just sitting here. So the cam is what's going to put pressure on this. However, there's a phenomenon with this style. If you have a manual transmission, all of a sudden you downshift into the wrong gear and you over rev this engine, this here's what's going to happen. One of these will fall. The car will still run, but when you get to idle, only one valve is opening. First, the engine will be a little bit underpowered, but you might not notice it because most of these are everyday cars. But at idle, it'll start misfiring only. You will pull the valve cover, you see one of these sitting down. That is a common thing now in the dynamic force engines. They put a clamp on the edge where it grabs it here and it doesn't fly off as easy, not just sitting like that. Now that all this is assembled, we're going to assemble our cam cradle with the new cams, and then we'll come install it back here. Let's assemble our cam housing or cam tower. Some folks have also called it that. And here it is. Let's talk about something with cam housings, because I've seen this before, and this question have come up. Any person that works on cars should know this, but you can't replace individual caps, folks. I see this question come up all the time. These, when they were made, they were installed here, rough, and then they were machined together. So you can't take this cap out of this engine and go put it in another one. That's not how this works. You can't actually do that. That is not possible. So these caps will always come with the engine. So let me take these caps off so we start assembling our cams, and we'll go from there. So let's pull our caps off. So you notice something different between these two. You notice this one has an oil passage in it. This one does not. This is where the VVTi gears will feed. So this is actually where your oil control valve will control these. This is where the valve cover is going to sit. So there's these two gaskets, and there's actually one more. This is for your VVTi control. This is where it's going to send oil one way or another way and then return, so it can control the VVTi timing. And then here on this cap you have this, which actually feeds oil to the valve cover for the spray that's going to spray the cams on the far side. So there are a few additional things that we have to do. So the 2AR FE, for reasons beyond my understanding, only has a cam bearing on the exhaust side, only in the front, not here, not anywhere else. That's just how they deemed it. Here's a camshaft, which if I find my pocket screwdriver, we can open it. I just wanted you guys to see how this comes in the box. It comes wrapped in a very strange way. Takes a little bit of an effort to oh, this one didn't, of course. I've done so many cams and they are always come wrapped in a very strange way with very distinct yellow tape. This one didn't, so there's that. There's your brand new exhaust cam. Come with the pin? Yes, it does. These are the things we want to make sure that they come with. Let's install our exhaust cam first. So these bearings are actually different part number, which is interesting. This is, I marked them from the part number. This is a lower bearing. The interesting thing about this bearing is it does not have a holder. So you have to make sure that it goes perfectly centered. Did I get it from the first shot? Yes, I did. Oh, I'm even proud of myself. This never happens. Yeah, that is good. Now, just so we wouldn't forget, we're going to install the other half on the other side, which is this one. So we're going to install this last bearing here. Let's try to get it perfectly centered because it does not have a guide. Okay, that is good. Now there's one more thing. Did you know that these engines actually had a tiny little filter that goes right there? So this is ready to go now. Let's install our exhaust cam. I'm going to put oil here. Here's our cam. Beautiful. I'm going to get my intake cam ready as well. Install that one. There it is. That was scary handling a cam. You drop it, we have major problems, of course. There it is. Beautiful. I like that, folks. This looks very beautiful. Let's put some more oil. You can never have more oil when you're assembling an engine. Sure our filter doesn't fall. Did not. That is, by the way, the filter for the VVTIs. Just run them down. Torque them to 12. Now that we got them torqued down, let's make sure our cams turn. Yes, they do. Very beautifully. Well, this cam cradle now is ready to go on the car. We're actually gonna flip it, not on the car, on the engine. I'm getting all excited already. Gonna give it a wipe down from oil, all debris. Did use oil to assemble them. Some of that got here on the surface. We're gonna do the same thing on the cylinder head. So let's apply our sealer here before we install it. There's many schools of thought. Do you apply the sealer on the cam tower or on the cylinder head? The manual in this particular case says to apply it here, so we will. But I've seen 2AR parts of the manual will tell you apply it on the cylinder head. So the answer for that is it doesn't really matter. As long as you get it on the correct spots, you shouldn't have issues. Okay, I like that. Let's install it. There we go. Just gonna set our cams in the right position. Right there. There it is. All right, let's do this. These are the same old bolts. These are not stretch bolts or anything. We just cleaned them up. They're going back. So I'm gonna use this just to run them down, then we'll torque them. Torque spec for this one is 20 foot-pounds. So now that we got the cams in, there's one thing very important that we make sure. We make sure that our rockers didn't fall off or move out of position. So let's take a look at them. Let's take a look at these. These are seated properly. So are these. These are also good. We're good here. And how about these over here? These are all good. I like them. They're all sitting properly. None of them jumped out, so I think we are good. So now that we did all that, I think it is time for us to move to the front. Let's do our chain, time the engine and everything, and then we'll wrap it up. Let's start with our cam gears. Put some oil here. Pin as well. Now we gotta be careful with our intake because it is currently unlocked. We will keep it unlocked until we install it, and then we will lock it. I'll show you how that process goes. Do you see these two marks right here? They are not lined up with each other. You never install a gear that is the locking type like this one with these marks together. That means it's locked. You'll destroy it right away. So we're going to install it with it unlocked. Once we tighten it, torque it down, we lock it, because if you forget to lock it, you'll also destroy it. So with that, no pressure at all. There it is. Gonna torque it down to spec. Let's install our second gear, and we will torque them both together. Second gear now, the exhaust one, does not have the lock. It is self-locking, and I'll show you why. Because this guy has this big spring that locks it, so it's always locked, doesn't have a lock pin. So let's install this one. Here it is. It's good. It's all the way. We're going to make sure. Yes, we are. Now, the torque spec for this one is 63. We're going to have to hold the cam. This particular cam is a 24. Most Toyota cams are 24s. Some of them are 27. Hold it. This is torqued. Let's try this one. That's it. So they're good to go. Now the intake one, let me get you a close-up so you can see it. So do you see how our marks are not lined up? I'm going to lock it now that we torqued it to spec. See how that locked? That is locked, not going anywhere. If you torque it like that, there's a little pin that you damage, and then this gear is basically, it's going to rattle continuously. And if you don't lock it, when you start this engine the first time, it's going to hit that lock so hard it might break it. So that's the correct procedure for this. Now that we got this, let's proceed to our chain. So to start our chain, we're going to install our first guide. The only thing we're reusing again for this guide is the bolt. It's just the bolt. The guide itself is new. And the torque for this one is 15. Gonna install our gear. Now that we got the guide on, let's turn our crank. So I don't have the spark plugs, so this shouldn't be very difficult to turn. There we go. That is top dead center. Should be very close to. I mean, of course, we're going to use the marks on the chain, so even if we need to move it a little bit, that's not a problem. Toyota chains are very simple, and they don't have any special 17 million special tools to install them, or none of that. Nothing. They're literally the simplest chains, even in their most complicated engine. Let's keep it simple. So I'm going to turn this cam, make sure it stays in time. It is. Okay. There it is. Are we on time? No, we are not. So this is the part that is fun about this. So this is where I'll ask Jose to help. So hold this cam going this way. Just don't put pressure on it, just hold it. I'm gonna get the chain off, move my crank. Is that enough? That went too far. Now you just have to skip it tooth by tooth until it gets to the exact time. There we go. Now I'm going to take the slack from this side. So I basically got my chain in time at the bottom. I'm going to hold this. It's already on time at the top. I'm going to install my big guide here that'll hold everything together. I'm going to torque this guide to 15. Then we're going to install the tensioner. Just going to sit right there, take care of all that. This tensioner does have a gasket on the 2AR. For some reason some engines do, some engines don't. Some of engines, one tensioner does, one tensioner doesn't. Just like the 3UR. And ironically on the 3UR, the tensioner that does have a gasket is the one that usually fails. Causes a clattering when they're cold. This one is going to be 7 foot-pounds. That's it. You can let it go, Jose. Now we got one more tensioner, and before we do, I'm going to put a little bit of oil here. It should run behind the chain. I'll let it run. We have one more guide. I'm sorry, not tensioner. Put a little bit of oil on this guide. You don't need a lot of oil on these guides. Since you start the engine, like prime it, you're gonna run a whole bunch of oil here. This is the guide that is common to break when this engine has a bad VBTI gear, which is something that is common with this engine in its early years, even if it's somewhat later years. But this is basically what you're replacing. Torque this one. We are good. So I want to make sure we don't have the chain is sitting right in the guide. We don't have any slack on this side. We don't have a lot of slack on this side because it's a pretty tight chain. We do have a little bit here. So we're going to make sure that we leave all our slack where the tensioner is. So right now we have a little bit of slack here. Nothing here, nothing here, nothing here, nothing here. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to pull the tensioner. We're going to move our slack from here to here. That means I got to turn the engine this way, just the cam, not the engine. So I'm going to move it. Listen to the tensioner. So this is very little slack. So I'm going to give it a little bit of help. I don't think we are so close to it. Knowing these engines, I'm going to want to tighten the tensioner, because over time it's not going to have enough force to overcome that and click into the next step. So I don't think I will be able to do that. It's extremely tight. I'm going to give it a shot. If it doesn't go, then it doesn't go. We just actually already took the tension out of this. So as soon as this tensioner pumps up, it's going to take this slack off. Jose, would you mind holding this? I'm going to give it one last shot to click it one more time. You don't have to put a lot of pressure, very little pressure. That's all we're doing. There you go. Did you hear that? This helps us, that's it. That one click of the tensioner is going to help us on a very quiet start. Now this is solid. There's still very little play here. That is normal, folks, but it was a little bit much. They don't tell you any of this stuff in the manual, but from experience, if you run this tensioner the way it was, it will rattle so much until it quiets down, and I worry that that rattling is actually weakening this guide. So we've always done it this way. Now that we've got everything, I'm gonna double check my timing marks. So why don't you guys join me in checking these timing marks so you guys can see them. So here's our first timing mark. Hope you can see it. There it is. See how the line lines up with the paint mark. Here's the other one. Also the line lines up with the paint mark. This one, try to get you the best shot possible. Do you see how there's a line here? It's gonna look like it's off depending on the angle. So this dot and the paint mark, when you look at it straight, they're lined up. Now if you go at it from the top, see how it shows at the bottom, but you can't be half a tooth off. And if you look at it from the bottom like that, it also can't be half a tooth off, but you have to look at it straight. That looks exactly in time, and we are set. So now that everything is done here, we got to install a few studs. One of them sits here and the other one sits here. It sits here actually. These just help us line up the front cover. Before we actually get the front cover going, we got to clean some of that sealer, that we kind of excess sealer from when we put the cam tower, the head gasket. See, that sealer is already drying. It's always easier to clean sealer when it's dry than when it's wet. It's gonna make a mess. See, because we did these the other day, for you guys it was the same video, but for us it was another day. Look how easy it is. That's it. Cut it. Same thing here. This is the most important area that is 100% clean. We're gonna make sure we spend our time, because this is where front covers love to leak. That is good. We're gonna give an initial wipe. Do another one right before we install our timing cover. Couple spots right here. Okay. We have a few gaskets that are gonna go. I think I'm gonna install them now. There's 1, 2, 3. So let's install those. Let's put our 3 gaskets here. There's 1. The reason there are these gaskets, because your oil pump's actually in the front timing cover. Speaking of the front timing cover, here it is. Beautiful front timing cover. I am very impressed by Toyota right now. I'll tell you why. They put a block-off plate. This is actually the access for the timing chain tensioner. And this, I was actually ready to go swap them out, the old one. They put them here. Very proud of you, Toyota, for making a very expensive part and then putting everything you need with it. That's very nice. Well, we don't need to do much here. And the reason we are replacing the front cover is because of the oil pump. You can't get this oil pump separate from the timing cover, so you have to get the whole timing cover. Very clean, very nice. Gonna put some cedar, gonna install it on the engine. So let me give this a quick wipe, give the engine one last clean, and then we're gonna install it. Let's apply the cedar on it. Gonna put extra where the head gasket meets. Oh, we have a piece of debris here. There we go. Nope, we still have a piece of debris. Gotta clean it. There it is. Just a clump of cedar that's clogging it. Apply this area. There we go. So the certain areas where two components meet, you always want to put a little bit more, like here. This is where the lower oil pan meets, or stiffening case meets the block. This area right here is where the cylinder head meets the block, meets the front cover. Here is the cam cradle. Got a couple spots here as well to seal the bolt. Okay, let's go do our final cleaning on the block and we're ready to roll. Let's give it a final clean. It's already clean, but just in case. Prep is everything. So this is gonna be the interesting part. I have a tool that aligns our oil pump, but that tool decided to break. And it's gonna be a little tricky to get it on. I see it doesn't want to go on. I'm gonna go without the tool. I'll hope for the best. I'll just manually do it. Before this tool existed, it's of course not an official tool. It's actually a tool made by a technician. Before this tool, we just used to line them up manually, just like this. There it is. There it is. Front cover's on. Let's get our bolts. We're gonna run our bolts down the gun and then torque them. 14mm bolts are 41 foot-pound. The rest of them are 16. In part of the procedure, we must install this bracket. It's a little rusty, but it's just a slab of cast iron. And this is external, so we are not worried about contamination. Let's do the 16s first. Alright, well that front cover is on. Only thing we're missing is let's install this front crank seal and we'll move on to the last couple things. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the lip here, install our seal. This is a new part. I can almost install the seal by hand. We're going to give it a little bit of help. I like that. That is done. Let's do the valve cover. And here's the valve cover. Believe it or not, this is how the valve cover comes for the 2AR from Toyota. Kind of strange. This comes bubble wrapped. Very delicate part. Folks will think valve cover is just a valve cover. It's actually not the case, because it has all this baffling and it has these sprayers for the cams, which are actually plastic. There is one thing we have to do with this valve cover before we install it, which is going to be the spark plug tube seals, and also the oil fill cap seal. Here's got an extra gasket. Here's a fun fact about this 2AR. Almost all Toyota engines, tube seals go from the bottom. This one, they go from the top. Very, very cool thing that they did here, because you can actually replace them without pulling the valve cover. And I just put a little bit of oil to help these seals seat. And most of the time, especially with a new valve cover, I'm hoping we can push them in by hand, because they're not really high tension. Just like that. That's it. All you got to do is just pull them out. Now, if you drop some debris inside, if you're changing them DIY, that's a problem. You got to pull the valve cover and pull that debris out. But as simple as that. Now, last but not least, let me go get the oil cap. We'll install it. We'll install this on the car. Here is that. Let's get the gasket out of it. If the gasket is old, not always the easiest proposition in the planet. No, I got it. Now, I have reason to suspect this cap may not be original. I don't understand why, but it seems to be decent quality. And if the gasket sits, then it is a decent quality. Yes, it does. Look at that. It's actually a very important maintenance item that you do, because this will make a giant mess if you don't replace it. Then we're going to put the cap. Let's install the valve cover. But before we celebrate and get all excited, let's put the gasket on. All right, let's install it. I'm going to remove this excess sealer here from when we did the timing cover. Going to give the rest of the surface a quick wipe down. We have these 3 gaskets that we talked about for the VVTi. Very important that you replace these and this one every time. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of sealer here, a little bit of sealer here. And the valve cover goes on. These 2 bolts in the middle, they have this little gasket. Oop, our seal popped. This is how easy these seals are to pop, folks. Torque spec for this is 9. Whenever you do a valve cover gasket, always double torque because they will change. See, this one turns a little bit. Just double check them. It wouldn't hurt. So I'm going to go around it. That's it. I just noticed one of our seals popped up again. Just make sure these are seated. Final. That's it. We got one last thing to do and this motor is done. So we're going to install our PCV baffle here. It's these two studs. One thing I will tell you, do not install these studs in the wrong position because the intake manifold sits here, and if you put them, it'll actually crack it. I think one of my first 2AR engines I've done, I made that mistake. One mistake is one too many. So I'm gonna give this a final wipe. Now this does have sealer. I did apply it off camera. We're actually ready to go for it. So this is the part we're also reusing out of the old engine because it is just a piece of metal. Torque spec for this is 15. And we're going to install the PCV valve. It's now very easy to do when it's out of the car. Torque spec for PCV valve is 20. Let's put the spark plugs. It's done. Torque spec for these is 18. That's it. It's done. And this long block is completely assembled. Now, of course, we're not done with this. You still have all the stuff that goes around it and putting it back in the car, starting it. It's still a long process to go for us here. But as far as this long block, this is a complete long block. Now, some long blocks will come without a valve cover, without an oil pan. That's just depending on the manufacturer. Some manufacturer will sell you an entire engine with manifolds, with everything just ready to bolt on and start. But if Toyota would start offering long blocks like this would be very nice, because then we don't have to spend the labor time, which is costly, to assemble this. This will be already assembled, ready to go. Unfortunately, they don't, and that's okay. Now, let's talk about a few things before we wrap up this video. The first thing is, what happened to this car? Why are we putting an entire long block? This car ran low on oil, for an extended period of time. Here's a small shot of the cylinder walls. There's absolutely no crosshatch. There was metal debris in this engine. It sounded horrendous. Let's put it this way. I wish we would have got a shot of it running, because it just sounded like it was done. And when you have metal debris in an engine, there is no way around it. Everything that oil touches should be replaced, except parts that you are 110% sure you can clean, like the oil pan, like the upper oil pan, or the crankshaft stiffening case, or this little container here. There's just a container, and the bolts. Obviously, bolts, you can clean them, that's not a big issue. But everything else has to be replaced, and this is what we're doing here. Now, the cost for this, including everything, from pulling the engine out of the original car, getting all these parts. Some of these parts are on back order, so it took a very long time. This car has been in our shop for a very long time as we go back and forth deciding what's the best course of action. This entire job cost over $16,000. Now, you can go and buy a very low mile, beautiful example of a 2010 Camry here for that amount. But the owner of this car has sentimental value to the car. The car matters a lot to them. And honestly, other than this, the car is in decent shape. It does have miles, it does have a little bit of rust. It's a New York car, but it's sentimental value. When sentimental value gets in a car, there is no right amount or wrong amount to spend into it. And in the end, after having a talk with the customer, this is what they want to do. this is what they're willing to spend. We are a shop open for business. We repair cars. We're going to advise you, but if you don't go with our advice because you have ulterior motives like sentimental value, we are open to do business and repair cars. This engine is complete. It took a lot. It took 2 days of full assembly on this, but we got everything going. There's still a long way to go. It's probably at least 2 or 3 more days of full work on the car, from beginning to end of the shop time. We still got to assemble all the accessories. We still got to install it in the car. We still got to make sure it's good. We're actually servicing the transmission as well, pulling the pan and whatnot. But this is a long block. It doesn't exist from Toyota, but now you see what it takes to actually build a long block from Toyota, brand new, except a few parts that are, we're not going to just rack up the build to make it look shiny. In the end, we want this engine to run for a long time, not just look pretty. Folks, I hope this video is helpful, informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.